The guy's name is Seiki. He is always playing games on his desk, while everyone else is studying. Rumi sees him taking out a lot of erasers. She doesn't understand what Seiki is doing. So, Rumi reminds him to stop, because their teacher is very strict. But, Seiki just signals her to be quiet. It turns out he is arranging the erasers like dominoes, making Rumi pay attention to him. Unexpectedly, she gets scolded by the teacher, startling Seiki. So, he drops an eraser, causing the dominoes to fall. Luckily, Seiki manages to stop them in time. But, Seiki immediately blames Rumi, leaving her shocked, because he was the one at fault first. At this point, Rumi continues observing Seiki. It turns out he has arranged the erasers into a massive domino structure, making Seiki exhausted. Rumi doesn't know what he wants to do. Unexpectedly, Seiki is trying to create fireworks, making Rumi worried and trying to stop him. But, Seiki has already started toppling the erasers, leaving Rumi shocked, because Seiki's dominoes are falling rapidly. She thinks the fireworks are going to explode. Unexpectedly, the fireworks were just in Seiki's imagination, making Rumi sigh in relief and lie down on the desk. But, she is immediately scolded by the teacher when she tries to report Seiki's mischief. Unexpectedly, he has already hidden all the erasers. The next morning, Seiki is playing another game on his desk. Rumi sees that it's shogi. She notices Seiki has drawn a board on his desk with a pen. So, she assumes it must be an erasable pen. When Seiki begins playing shogi, surprising everyone around him, Rumi reminds him not to make noise. But, she notices that one of the shogi pieces is broken. He is using his own pieces to play against himself. So, she thinks Seiki doesn't know the rules of the game. Suddenly, he puts a crown on one of the shogi pieces. Rumi realizes Seiki has killed the king to seize the throne, leaving her puzzled about what Seiki is doing. He even makes all the subordinate pieces turn into enemies, making Rumi very curious. She has no idea what Seiki will do next. Suddenly, Seiki activated a trap on his shogi board, leaving Rumi surprised. She realized Seiki had modified his desk just to play the game, and he gave a sly smile. Rumi saw that he had turned his enemies into allies. Suddenly, he was surrounded by all the enemy pieces, making Rumi start to worry as well. She had no idea what Seiki would do. Unexpectedly, he made the king piece run away. Then, all of Seiki's other pieces were surrounded, making Rumi focus on Seiki's board. She wanted to save the king piece. So, Rumi shot an eraser at one of his pieces, causing it to fall out of the window, making Seiki angry, because she had ruined his game. The next day, Rumi thought Seiki was copying notes, but he was only using a rag to clean his desk. She realized the desk was very important to Seiki, because it was where he played his games. Suddenly, he took out a desk cleaning kit, surprising Rumi. At that moment, she saw Seiki polishing his desk. She thought he was removing scratches. Suddenly, Seiki started scraping the desk, causing fragments to fly onto Rumi. Even the classmate sitting above him got covered in the polishing agent. Then, Seiki continued wiping the desk, making his desk shine brightly. This surprised Rumi, because his desk now looked like a mirror. Seiki felt very pleased, while Rumi was focused on studying. Suddenly, Seiki wanted to polish her desk too. But, Rumi refused. Seiki even offered to pay Rumi to let him polish her desk. However, Rumi still declined, and she told Seiki to focus on the lecture, making Seiki feel bored. He sighed repeatedly and continued polishing his own desk. Rumi realized Seiki really enjoyed polishing. So, she handed Seiki her small board, making Seiki very excited. He immediately began polishing it. At this moment, Rumi thought Seiki was quite adorable. A while later, he finished polishing her board. Unexpectedly, it looked like a mirror. Suddenly, Rumi felt a static shock, causing her hair to stand on end. Rumi realized Seiki had deliberately created static electricity with her, making her furious. The next morning, Seiki brought out a Go board, surprising Rumi, because everyone else was focused on studying. But, he was comfortably playing Go. So, Rumi kept paying attention to him. However, she didn't know the rules of Go, making her curious. But, Rumi felt that Seiki was unusually quiet today, so she could focus on the lecture. Yet, Rumi remained very curious. Suddenly, She saw Seiki arranging the ghost stones into the shapes of a bear and a rabbit, leaving her confused about what he was doing. Unexpectedly, the bear and rabbit started fighting. So, she thought the rules of Go might be like this. Suddenly, the teacher asked everyone to take notes, distracting Rumi. So, she ended up doodling the bear and rabbit in her notebook, making Rumi frustrated, because it was all Seiki's fault. Suddenly, Seiki started doing something else. It turned out he was combining the bear and rabbit together, surprising Rumi. Even though she was trying to focus on her notes, she remained curious about what Seiki was doing. Unexpectedly, he used the combined bear-rabbit to continue fighting. So, Rumi began imagining along with him. It was fighting against its own ego. But, Rumi realized Seiki was intentionally letting the white pieces lose, making her worried. Suddenly, she was scolded by the teacher, because she had lost focus during class, when she said it was Seiki's fault. Unexpectedly, he had already hidden all the ghost stones, leaving Rumi surprised. But, she still had evidence. She showed the teacher her drawing of the rabbit and bear, making him furious. The next morning, Rumi had a chemistry class. Suddenly, she noticed Seiki was up to something again. He took out a carving knife. It turned out Seiki was engraving letters onto an eraser. Then, he pressed the eraser into an ink pad to make stamps, making Seiki very excited. But, Rumi thought it was a pointless activity. Suddenly, she saw Seiki hide the stamp. It turned out he was embarrassed about Uzawa, because Uzawa was often bored and indifferent, and he would take away interesting things. Rumi thought that if Uzawa sat next to Seiki, he might be able to study seriously. Unexpectedly, Seiki was carving something again. This made Rumi even more curious. Very quickly, he carved the eraser into a long stamp. Rumi saw him as a professional sculptor. While Seiki was focused, he realized his carving knife had disappeared. It turned out Uzawa had taken it. Uzawa didn't know what Seiki was trying to do. He didn't even ask permission to take Seiki's things. Suddenly, Uzawa pressed Seiki's fingers into the ink pad and stamped them onto his notebook, leaving Seiki helpless. But, Uzawa quickly grew bored. While Seiki was feeling frustrated, he pulled out another eraser. It turned out the eraser was actually a box, and he used it to store his stamp. Then, he disguised it as an ordinary eraser, surprising Rumi. While Seiki was feeling very pleased, suddenly, the teacher told them to take notes, making Rumi and Uzawa nervous. But, Seiki just sat there admiring his creation. Suddenly, Uzawa made a mistake while writing. So, he grabbed Seiki's eraser, surprising both Seiki and Rumi. And Seiki's eraser and stamp were broken, leaving Seiki in shock. But, Uzawa still didn't care, and he continued taking notes. Rumi felt like Seiki was falling apart. Unexpectedly, the teacher erased the board, leaving Rumi shocked, because she hadn't finished copying the notes. The next morning, the teacher announced they would have a disaster evacuation drill. Rumi thought someone as unserious as Seiki would struggle to keep up. While Seiki was engrossed in playing with robot models, she noticed Seiki is having the robot play a family game, surprising her, because boys usually made robots fight. Suddenly, the earthquake alarm rang, so the students hid under their desks. But Seiki remained calm and unfazed, surprising Rumi, because he wasn't taking the drill seriously. It turned out Seiki had his robots hide under the desk. Rumi saw that although Seiki was irresponsible, but he had his robots undergo serious training. Then, everyone had to evacuate outside. Rumi saw Seiki carrying his robots on his back. So, she thought, if Seiki could be as serious as this robot family, it would be great, making her imagine the robot family being very happy. By this time, everyone had gathered in the schoolyard. While Rumi kept watching the robot family, it made her feel relaxed. Suddenly, Seiki accidentally kicked the robots. So, she felt annoyed with Seiki. However, Seiki realized his robots had disappeared. This made him worried. It turned out Rumi had taken them, because she felt Seiki didn't deserve to keep the robot family, shocking him. After that, Rumi brought the robots back to the classroom, and she started taking care of them, making Rumi very delighted, while Seiki could only watch her. But, he couldn't take the robots back. The next morning, Rumi saw everyone exchanging handwritten letters. Unexpectedly, Seiki was writing a lot of letters, surprising her. Rumi didn't understand why Seiki was writing so many letters. Suddenly, he began stamping his letters. Rumi discovered she also had a letter. It turned out Tomoka had written to her. She explained that Seiki was acting as a postman, delivering letters to the whole class. As long as they gave their letters to Seiki, he would stamp them. But Rumi just considered it a silly game. At this point, Tomoka invited Rumi to join in. So, Rumi also started writing a letter to Seiki. She told Seiki to take studying seriously and to stop bothering her. Unexpectedly, Seiki didn't accept her letter because Rumi's letter violated the size requirement, annoying Rumi. Since Seiki was pretending to be a real postman, Rumi had to fold her letter. Unexpectedly, she also had to choose a delivery method, frustrating Rumi because it was too troublesome. But she still followed Seiki's demands. Unexpectedly, Seiki's post office was closed, making Rumi furious. But she noticed she could still drop her letter into a mailbox, surprising Rumi because Seiki had created a mailbox there. At this moment, Rumi seized the opportunity while the teacher wasn't looking. She tried to put the letter into the mailbox, but it was too far away, causing Rumi to knock over her chair, making noise. Luckily, the teacher didn't notice her. Finally, Rumi managed to drop her letter into the mailbox. So, she thought Seiki would read her letter, because she had written all the struggles she had to endure with him. By the afternoon, Rumi was still very upset, because Seiki didn't bother to check the mailbox. She decided to put the letter in Seiki's drawer. Unexpectedly, she was misunderstood as liking Seiki. The next morning, Rumi saw Seiki continue playing shogi, which made her feel reassured, because she wouldn't be curious about shogi anymore. Suddenly, she saw Seiki using just one piece to fight against an entire army of pieces. She didn't understand what he was doing. At this point, Seiki had used the princess piece, which surprised Rumi, because there was no such piece in shogi. He placed the princess and the pawn running away together. So, the king wanted to chase them down, which surprised Rumi, because it seemed like a love story. The princess and the pawn loved each other, but they were stopped by the king. So, they had to run away together. This made Rumi feel very romantic, and she continued to wonder what Seiki would do next. Unexpectedly, he attacked the pawn, injuring the pawn. So, the princess immediately protected the pawn, and they became husband and wife, giving the pawn the power to attack the enemy. But the princess was captured. Then, the enemy tortured the pawn, which made Rumi very heartbroken. So, she didn't want to watch anymore. Suddenly, she saw a piece under her feet. It turned out that this piece was the pawn's father. She thought he had been brainwashed to attack his own son. So, Rumi decided to bring the pawn's father back to save his son. But Seiki used a book to block her, which made Rumi annoyed, because she wanted to save the pawn. Suddenly, the teacher asked Seiki to read the lesson, and Rumi realized this was her opportunity. Unexpectedly, Seiki used many pieces to create a wall. She realized Seiki had planned ahead. But Rumi didn't give up. She shot a piece and broke through his wall. So, the pawn and the princess were saved, which made Rumi very happy. But Seiki didn't know which page to read from. So, Rumi had to remind him. The next morning, Rumi continued to see Seiki knitting, which surprised her, because Rumi was the second best knitter in the school. It turned out that since first grade, Rumi had a talent for knitting, and she had knitted many things to give to everyone. But, because she knitted so well, so, everyone didn't believe that she knitted it herself. At this point, Rumi didn't believe Seiki could knit, because knitting wasn't a class pastime. Unexpectedly, Seiki knit very quickly. This was the technique of a professional. She saw some stuffing on Seiki's table. So, she thought he was making a stuffed animal. Suddenly, Rumi realized his crochet technique was the double-ended crochet technique. This was a very difficult technique. But Rumi still thought Seiki couldn't do it, because the double-ended crochet hook wasn't used for making stuffed animals, and it was used to crochet high artistic value products. It could even be used to knit woolen clothes, helping to keep the body warm in the winter. But stuffed animals could only use the regular hook, because it would make the stitches firmer. So, she believed Seiki couldn't do it. When Seiki finished knitting, she realized he had knit a simple cactus. But she couldn't take her eyes off Seiki's cactus. It made her feel like it was standing in the middle of the desert. Rumi hadn't expected. This technique of Seiki's made the cactus look so real. So, she felt she had lost to Seiki. When she also wanted to hug Seiki's stuffed cactus. But, he immediately unraveled the yarn. Which shocked Rumi, because he had destroyed his own creation. So, she wanted Seiki to redo it. Which made Seiki nervous, because Rumi could be very scary. The next morning, Rumi's class had a drawing lesson. Suddenly, she realized Seiki was about to do something again. Meanwhile, Sakura felt that Rumi was someone who cared about her friends. So, she wanted to be friends with Rumi. Since they had never spoken to each other before, she wanted to start a conversation with Rumi. At this point, Rumi realized Seiki was playing golf, and he was using the small hole on the table. But, she thought the hole was too small. So, Seiki wouldn't be able to play golf properly. Unexpectedly, he hit the golf ball into the hole, which amazed her. But, Rumi thought Seiki had just gotten lucky. It turned out he had carefully observed the cracks on the table to direct the golf ball in the right direction. This was the technique of professional golfers. Meanwhile, Sakura noticed Rumi paying attention to Seiki, and she thought Rumi had a secret crush on Seiki. Sakura also wanted to help her, but they weren't friends yet. Suddenly, Seiki aimed towards Rumi's table, and it turned out the second hole was near her. But the hole was too far away, and Rumi thought he wouldn't be able to hit it. Meanwhile, Sakura was surprised, because she saw Rumi and Seiki staring at each other intently. So, she thought they were already dating. Suddenly, the teacher handed out materials to them. Accidentally, Rumi pushed Seiki's ball out of the hole. This shocked him. So, Seiki sulked. Rumi immediately apologized to Seiki. Sakura didn't understand why they were arguing, even though they hadn't said a word. So, Sakura thought they had reached the stage of living together. Suddenly, Seiki handed Rumi a flag, asking her to hold the flag for him. Then, they both went to look for the golf ball together, which shocked Sakura. She thought they were kissing under the table. At lunch break, Sakura started a conversation with Rumi. She promised to support Rumi, which made Rumi very happy, because she thought someone finally understood her. The next morning, Rumi saw Seiki take out a small teddy bear, which made her excited, because the teddy bear was so cute. She didn't know what Seiki was going to do with it. Suddenly, Seiki became very tense. It turned out there was another teddy bear on Maeda's back, which made Rumi worried. So, Rumi reminded him not to play with someone else's back. Suddenly, the teddy bear started climbing by itself, which surprised Rumi. It turned out Seiki had tied a string to Maeda's shirt. Suddenly, Maeda moved, which made them nervous, because the teddy bear was shaking. Rumi felt like they were playing an extreme mountain climbing game. Suddenly, the teddy bear stopped, because Seiki's string got stuck. Rumi felt like this was an obstacle. Suddenly, Maeda twisted his neck, which made them worry. Fortunately, he didn't notice. At this point, the teddy bear was almost at the top, which made Rumi and Seiki very nervous. Finally, the teddy bear reached the top, which made Rumi very happy. Suddenly, Maeda shook his head. This made the teddy bear fly out of the window, which shocked both Rumi and Seiki. Fortunately, Seiki still held onto the string. So, he managed to pull the teddy bear back up, which made them both relieved. Suddenly, Seiki wanted to try again. But, Maeda noticed him, which made Rumi worried, because she would also be considered an accomplice. However, Seiki didn't give up, which left Rumi unsure of how to stop him. The next morning, Rumi saw Seiki taking out a remote-controlled car. So, she intended to remind Seiki. Unexpectedly, she saw Seiki deeply focused on studying. This surprised Rumi. It turned out he was studying traffic laws, and he gave himself a score of 90. Then, Seiki took out a driving school model. So, Rumi thought he wanted to take a driving test. But, he was taking the test on his desk. First, he inspected his car. Then, Seiki began controlling the car. This surprised Rumi, because he was driving the car very carefully. Suddenly, he drove onto the curb. Fortunately, he backed up when Seiki's car climbed a slope. Suddenly, the car flipped over. This shocked Seiki, because he failed the test. The next morning, Seiki continued playing with the remote-controlled car. This surprised Rumi, because he rarely played the same game for 2 consecutive days. Rumi noticed a band-aid on Seiki's hand, She realized that Seiki had been practicing a lot. Seiki was very careful, so he successfully made it through. This made Seiki very happy. He immediately issued himself a driver's license. Meanwhile, Rumi also wanted a driver's license. Suddenly, the teacher called on him. Because the teacher thought Seiki wanted to speak. This shocked him, so he asked Rumi for help. And he promised to issue a driver's license to Rumi. This delighted Rumi. But first, she needed to pass the test. So, Rumi immediately refused. This left Seiki in shock. At this point, Rumi's class was having a first aid lesson at the swimming pool. But, Rumi saw that Seiki wasn't taking it seriously, which made her uncomfortable. Suddenly, she saw the robot family here as well. And she didn't understand why Seiki brought the robots to this important lesson. But, she thought the robots were very cute. Because they were studying more seriously than Seiki. Which made her very amused. After the first aid lesson ended, the teacher allowed them to use the swimming pool. Which made everyone excited. So, they all jumped into the pool. While Rumi was looking for Seiki, he was happily playing around. Which made her disappointed, because he ignored the robots. Rumi thought swimming was a reward for those who made an effort. Thus, she felt Seiki didn't deserve it. Rumi decided to find a place for the robots. And fortunately, she found a comfortable spot for them. After that, Rumi went swimming. Suddenly, Uzawa found the robots, which made him excited. So, he threw them into the pool. This made Rumi worried. Fortunately, the robot floated up. Suddenly, Maeda swam over, causing the robot to be swept away by the water. Rumi felt like the robot was lost in the middle of the ocean. Suddenly, it got stuck in Sakura's hair. So, Rumi jumped into the water. While Seiki also saw his robot. When Rumi arrived, she couldn't find the robot anymore. It turned out Seiki had found the robots, which made him relieved. At this point, the swimming lesson had ended. But, Rumi was still searching for the robot. The next morning, Rumi was preparing to have lunch. And she saw Seiki's bento box, which was very cute, which made her excited. But, Seiki had already eaten it. This shocked Rumi. She felt Seiki's way of eating was so ruthless. Although food is meant to be eaten, she tried not to care about Seiki and continued eating. Suddenly, she noticed Seiki still had many octopus-shaped sausages. She didn't understand why he only ate this dish. Suddenly, he connected the octopuses together, as if they were trying to save their friend. This made Rumi feel very heartbroken. But, Seiki pierced through them, and continued eating ruthlessly. Rumi felt like Seiki was a cruel giant, and he was destroying the octopuses. Suddenly, a stronger octopus appeared. Rumi realized it was the hero of the octopuses, and it was trying to save its friends. But, it was still easily eaten by Seiki, which made her uncomfortable. Suddenly, Seiki choked on his food. Rumi realized this was a punishment for him. Meanwhile, the girls noticed Rumi's sinister expression, which made her unsure how to explain herself. She realized it was because she had paid too much attention to Seiki. Suddenly, Seiki stopped eating the octopuses. She thought he had grown tired of them. So, there are still 4 octopuses left. This made Rumi very happy. But, Seiki fed the octopuses to his friends, which shocked Rumi. She felt the octopuses were too pitiful. Suddenly, Seiki took out another dish, which made Rumi unable to bear it anymore. At that moment, Rumi's class had an art lesson. While Sakura thought she would sit close to Rumi today. Unexpectedly, Rumi had thought to skip class today, because she had a cold. So, Sakura began to pay attention to Seiki. She thought Seiki seemed sad because he didn't have Rumi around. Suddenly, she saw Seiki doing something. She realized it was a paper sumo match. She didn't understand why Seiki brought this to class. So, Sakura thought Seiki and Rumi were arguing. At that point, the sumo wrestler lost. So, Seiki bandaged it up. This shocked Sakura, because she thought something had happened to Rumi, and that she was crying alone at home. At that moment, Seiki continued the match. He made the paper robot and paper sumo wrestlers continue fighting. But, the sumo wrestler lost again. So, Seiki continued bandaging it up. Sakura thought this showed the wound in Seiki's heart. Unexpectedly, the paper robot continued to grow larger, making Sakura very worried, because Seiki was deeply hurt. Meanwhile, Seiki was enjoying himself. Accidentally, Sakura kicked Seiki's table. causing his paper robot to lose. Seiki thought that Rumi was still watching him, which made him fearful, while Sakura thought that Seiki was missing Rumi. After that, he put away the sumo ring, making Sakura very happy, because she thought they would reconcile. The next morning, Rumi was feeling better, which made everyone happy. At that moment, Rumi's class had an important lesson. But Rumi saw that Seiki was continuing to play shogi. Suddenly, he took out some chess pieces as well, which made her not understand what Seiki was trying to do. It turned out he wanted to play shogi against chess. But Rumi thought this was impossible, because the rules of the two types of games were different. As Seiki was preparing to play, the lesson started, making the room go dark. Rumi thought that Seiki would not be able to play the game. Suddenly, she saw the shogi pieces falling down. It turned out that Seiki was still fighting in the dark. She realized that the shogi pieces had already lost, because the chess pieces were black, making it impossible for the shogi pieces to see them. It was like they were being assassinated by a killer, which made Rumi uncomfortable, because she thought Seiki was playing unfairly. Suddenly, Rumi used her eraser, but the classroom was too dark, so she couldn't shoot the eraser. If she didn't do anything, the shogi pieces would lose. Suddenly, she saw the shogi pieces on the floor. As Seiki was about to end the game, he saw the shogi pieces back on his board, which surprised him. He didn't understand why they could come back, which scared him. It turned out Rumi had secretly placed the shogi pieces back on his board, while Seiki thought that this was the ghost of the pieces. He quickly put them away, making Rumi pleased, because she had punished Seiki. Suddenly, she realized that her skirt was caught, which shocked Rumi, because she couldn't get out. The next morning, Rumi saw Seiki doing something again. Suddenly, he covered his eyes. It turned out Seiki was playing the Fukurai game. He was placing the facial features in the correct positions. Rumi saw Seiki placing them incorrectly. It made her laugh. Unexpectedly, everyone heard it. This made Rumi feel embarrassed. Fortunately, she wasn't punished. Rumi then blamed Seiki for causing her trouble. But she was still very curious. To her surprise, Seiki placed the features perfectly. This amazed her. Rumi never expected Seiki to be so good at this game. Suddenly, he wanted to do something else. It turned out he was trying to create a new hairstyle. But this hairstyle was very bad. It made Rumi dislike it. Suddenly, the teacher erased the board. So, Rumi had to immediately start copying the notes. At that moment, Seiki continued to arrange the pieces. It turned out he had created a family. She realized that Seiki was really good at this game, because he could arrange everything just as he wanted. But the child's face resembled that of an adult. Suddenly, Seiki made the child stand up. This made Rumi very happy, because she felt that this family was very happy. At this moment, Seiki continued to make the child grow up. Rumi felt like this was a family memory album. Then, the child started going to school. But Rumi noticed that he was slowly distancing himself from his family. Unexpectedly, the child became a delinquent student. This shocked Rumi. So, she wanted to do something about it. Rumi immediately rolled up the book to blow the child closer to his parents. Suddenly, she blew into Seiki's hand. This startled him. Fortunately, Seiki didn't realize what Rumi had done. But the child's family became happy again. The next morning, the teacher handed out materials to the class. But only Rumi and Seiki were missing them. So, they had to look at the materials together. This made Rumi nervous, because she didn't know what Seiki would do next. Suddenly, she realized Seiki was angry. It turned out that the two desks had been pulled close together. So, Seiki couldn't take out his toys. This made Rumi very happy, because she had discovered Seiki's weakness. Suddenly, Seiki opened the pencil case. It turned out he had hidden a deck of cards in the pencil case. Seiki let Rumi choose an ace of diamonds. Then, he shuffled the cards and correctly picked Rumi's ace of diamonds. This made Rumi feel helpless, because he was trying to perform a card trick. But Seiki seemed very pleased. This made Rumi anxious. Rumi realized this was the expression that magicians often use. Seiki continued to let Rumi choose another card. But Rumi didn't care, because she had to focus on studying. No matter how many tricks Seiki did, Rumi still wouldn't look at him. Suddenly, Rumi saw the ace of diamonds under the materials. This surprised her, because she didn't know when Seiki had placed the ace there. This made Rumi very curious. But she still decided to focus on studying, and she crumpled Seiki's card. Suddenly, Remy saw the ace of diamonds stuck to Maeda's pants. She didn't understand how it got there, because she had already crumpled his card. At this moment, Seiki was still trying to get Remy to watch his magic tricks, but she kept trying to stay calm. She thought Seiki's magic tricks were nonsense, because he has 2 ace of diamonds cards. She remains calm. Suddenly, Seiki opened the crumpled card. Unexpectedly, it was the 6 of spades, and he took the ace of diamonds out of his mouth, which surprised Rumi, and the lesson had ended. The next morning, Rumi noticed Seiki was wearing glasses, which surprised her, and she remembered, when Rumi arrived at school, she saw Seiki had not worn glasses. So, Rumi didn't know where Seiki had gotten these glasses from. She thought Seiki was nearsighted, and he wore glasses to study seriously, which made her happy. Suddenly, Seiki took out a mirror to check. Rumi thought he was checking if the glasses suited him. Suddenly, Seiki took out many more pairs of glasses, which shocked Rumi. She didn't know why Seiki had so many glasses with him. So, she reminded him to put them away. But he continued to seriously look into the mirror. Rumi had no choice but to ignore him. Suddenly, Rumi realized the glasses suited Seiki very well, and he looked very cute. But when Seiki looked at her, Rumi immediately turned her face away. Then, Seiki continued to change to another pair of glasses. Rumi kept giving her opinions. She still preferred Seiki wearing square glasses. Unexpectedly, he chose red glasses to transform into a superhero, which made Rumi uncomfortable. At this point, Seiki felt that Rumi was very scary, and she wanted to force Seiki to wear square glasses. In the end, Seiki had to choose according to her preference. Rumi thought this style of Seiki looked very handsome, which made Rumi very happy. But in the following days, Rumi didn't see Seiki wearing glasses anymore, which made her angry. The next morning, Seiki seemed to be studying very seriously. But Rumi realized he was playing with a flip book. So, she thought Seiki wanted to create some kind of artwork. But she had never seen Seiki draw before, which made Rumi very curious. She thought Seiki was a good artist. But she saw Seiki writing. Rumi thought he was writing song lyrics, because writing words in a flip book would be too fast to read. Suddenly, Rumi discovered he wrote on every page of the book, which made Rumi feel exhausted, because this task was very tough. But she realized she had to focus on her studies. After Seiki finished writing, he immediately used a recorder to record his voice, which surprised Rumi. She felt Seiki resembled a voice actor for anime, and making anime required constantly changing many images. But Seiki was only drawing in one book. She realized this work was very tough, and Seiki was trying to create an anime product. At that moment, Rumi thought Seiki looked very professional. Finally, Seiki finished. When it was lunchtime, Rumi, very curious about Seiki's flip book, secretly decided to take a look. She realized Seiki had added sound effects like footsteps and birds, which surprised her. Suddenly, Rumi heard singing. Fortunately, it wasn't Seiki's voice. At this point, Rumi felt everything was very realistic, which made her feel excited. But at the end of the recording, there was an advertisement for a model store, which surprised her. It turned out that Seiki had asked the store owner to do the recording earlier. The next morning, Rumi went to the teacher's room. The teacher said that her studies were declining, which surprised her. Rumi realized it was because of Seiki. But if she told the teacher about what Seiki had done, she would be in a difficult position with Seiki. Suddenly, Rumi heard the teacher was going to check the bags. So, she realized the teacher would find Seiki's toys, and then he would focus more on his studies, and she would be able to focus on her own studies. At that moment, Rumi was very happy. Suddenly, she saw Seiki take out the robot family, and he had brought bags for them. Rumi thought the robot family wanted to go on a picnic. But then she remembered the teacher would find Seiki's robots, and he would throw them away, which made her worried. At that moment, the teacher announced it was time to check the bags, which surprised everyone. Suddenly, Rumi reminded Seiki. She told him to hide the robots quickly. Unexpectedly, he had let the robots take out their bags to be checked, which made Rumi anxious, because the teacher was coming soon. Suddenly, Seiki took out a box, and he threw the things he needed to hide out of the window. But Rumi noticed the robots were still here. She realized there was no more time. While Seiki was still thinking, he hid the robots in his bento box. But Rumi noticed there was still one robot left. She thought Seiki would be caught. Unexpectedly, when the teacher checked Seiki's bag, everything was fine. It turned out he had hidden the robot behind the chair. So, Seiki was safe. When the teacher checked Rumi's bag, he found a music CD, which shocked her, because she had borrowed this CD from Tomoka. While Seiki was surprised, which made Rumi very angry. In the end, the teacher confiscated her CD, and Rumi had to write a self-reflection, which made her even angrier. So, she blamed everything on Seiki. That evening, she heard her mom announce that the teacher would visit their house, which shocked Rumi. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support Oni-chan in the upcoming videos. Thank you for watching. Love you always.